Welcome to the Electronic Monitoring Pilot Project training for using Monitor to review and analyze data from the Kenya longline and commercial shrimp trawl fisheries. Today we're going to be using Monitor, the online platform created by Integrated Monitoring, to review the active trips we're looking at for Kenya project. It's the dawn of a new era for monitoring and observing catch off Kenya's shores. We'll be looking at video collected from 3 vessels participating in the project. We have the Miss Jane, a commercial longliner primarily targeting swordfish. We have the Newfoundland, primarily targeting tuna and swordfish, as well as the Minyara, the commercial trawl shrimp vessel that we've been looking at. My name is Christy Smith and I work for AIS, and we have been in charge of the review for this project. I'd like to walk you through how you log into Monitor. Review starts at the sign-in page. This cloud-native platform integrates video and data annotations seamlessly with things like GPS and other data relevant to the vessels. So to begin, you'll go to monitor.integratedmonitoring.net. You'll see a sign-in page to access the secure server that is hosted by Amazon Web Services. From there, you'll be granted access to only vessels you have permission to see. The home screen will populate with all your project boats, and we'll navigate to the vessel of interest from the All tab or directly through the map. Let's take a look at the Miss Jane. After selecting the vessel, Monitor is going to show you the last known or the current location of the vessel. So today is April 1st, and we see Miss Jane is docked in Mombasa, their home port. Once you have the vessel loaded, you can take a look at either a specific date in mind. Let's say we wanted to check out a date back in March. You can see they're also in port. Or from the date tab on the bottom, we can access the trips. So let's take a look at a trip from February. Now that the trip data has loaded, let's move on to discussing how to create annotations. It's important to mark start and end of different duration events, such as the span of the trip. For example, this trip started February 17th and ended March 2nd, spanning almost 2 weeks, 13 days, 14 hours. The trip departed and arrived in Mombasa, and this was selected for a 20% review rate. You can see the orange designates the trip, and this corresponds to the chart on the right, showing the vessel's track throughout the fishing trip. We can also highlight different events relevant to the gear. This lane is for setting gear. We can see them in camera 3. Begin to set gear, and this is when our team marked as the start of gear setting. This event spanned 1 hour and 18 minutes, and I can demonstrate that by arrowing down to see the very end of the event when the gear deployment is complete. This is a longline fishery, and hooks are added as the gear is set and individually removed when the gear is retrieved. If we zoom in on the chart, you can see the setting activity is the green, which corresponds to our annotation created representing that time. And then the gear retrieval is this turquoise color when they've retrieved it sometime later. So once we have defined the setting of gear and the recovery of gear, next is the evaluation of catch. For this example, let's take a look at one of the reviewed hauls. Review begins when the first buoy is retrieved. You can see in camera 1 that this is when the reviewer noted that recovery has begun based on the buoy coming on board. Select a playback speed and begin to play the gear retrieval. Each hook is counted as it's brought on board, and if there's a catch item, it's evaluated as a catch, which we interpret as retained, or a protected species such as a shark, turtle, mammal, and those are noted for their condition as well. Let's zoom to a catch item. So in this event, a barracuda is brought on board. You can see the fish against the length measuring strip, which is painted on deck. And from this view, you can estimate the total fork length of the catch item. The animal is processed and the notes are entered into monitor. You can see here it's noted in inches, which is what the measuring grid is initially painted in, and then converted to a centimeter, which we use to derive a weight estimate in a length-weight conversion formula. Catch items are entered as they come on board. We can take a look at a protected item. In this event, it was a blue shark that was kept. So you can see the animal being processed. And we've recorded notes here that it was finned and kept, not released. So in addition to hook counts, the catch items and protected items, we're recording any issues we see as we review the video. In this instance, there was a approximately 1 minute video outage on camera 5, and you can see that that's entered in the issues lane. This spans the duration of the outage, and that is captured in the data to give background information about what was happening during that haul. To create a trip, start by accessing the vessel from the All Vessel list. Once you've arrived at your boat, you'll want to identify the start date of the trip. If you have a good idea of when they start, you can begin with the calendar by accessing the date window from the center of the screen. So I know this trip started about mid-February, so that's when I'll start looking for a trip departure. This is February 13th. Now using this arrow in the lower right corner, we're going to page through each day and look for vessel tracks indicating they've left port. February 14th, no movement. Okay, here's our trip departure. Now we'll use the scroll bar in blue on the bottom to locate the time when the vessel leaves port. You can see the cameras correspond to what's happening at that point in time. Okay, here they go. Let's zoom in and narrow down the time of departure. Okay, so once we've located that, go back about 10 minutes and you'll do Control I. This selects the start of the trip. Now we need to find when they come back into port. Let's zoom out on the chart and again use this arrow on the bottom right corner to look through the trip records. This is going to take us through day by day. going to give a snapshot of the day, and I'm looking for the vessel tracks to see where they are. Let's zoom in on this. Does not appear they landed. Looks like they were resting. Airport. And the trip did not end. So we'll continue our records. You can see a snapshot of the catch as we go through day by day. Okay, March 2nd, they've appeared to come into port. Let's find the time they land. Okay, here it is. At this point, we're going to do Control O on the keyboard, followed by Control Enter. This will pop up with a window to name the trip. I'll name this Demonstration. Monitor will say trip was created. I'll click OK. And now to access that trip, again click on the date window in the bottom. Go to the trip list. And you can see the trip we've created, labeled Demonstration, pops up. So at this point, we've encompassed the GPS records that we just flipped through, all trip video. And now we have a spot to begin our annotations. The first thing you'll do is go back. I've made a note that they departed at February 17th at 10:31. We'll use my mouse wheel to locate that time. All the way up top. You can drag this time bar, and this again corresponds to the vessel video and tracks on the right. Okay, to create a new trip, you'll make sure that the trip lane is highlighted. You can see this lighter gray color, and then hit enter. Now we've created a trip that begins at 10:31 on February 17th. And we can click to confirm that this is indeed when they pull off. You can see the vessel behind them appearing smaller as they leave. And now we'll use the mouse wheel to scroll out on the timeline to find the ending location. Alternatively, we could use the chart to narrow in on the end time. I've made a note that the trip landed March 2nd at 0044. Zoom in on the vessel, confirm that they are back at dock. Once you're happy with your placement, the cursor needs to be at the time the trip's going to end, and you'll use this Set Event End button, an arrow pointing to the right, and this will create a duration event. We've now encapsulated that trip into our trip lane. As you go through the video, you'll enter any issues you'll find, and this is done in the same fashion. For example, there was a camera outage at this time, you would hit enter while the issue lane is selected. Select the category, such as camera not clean, camera knocked out of position, water spots on the video, whatever is most pertinent, and record the relevant information of who it was reported to, and then follow up with if it was resolved. You'll use the same drag and drop process from the trip to find the endpoint. Let's consider this the end, and we'll use this right facing arrow to set that duration. If you've made a mistake, you can use the delete or backspace button to delete the event. Because this is an example, I'm going to delete it. Now, once you've begun trip review, use the chart to your advantage to locate the start of fish gear setting. You could also slowly drag through the time bar to find those start and end points. Okay, so there they are. With the setting lane highlighted, you'll hit enter. You'll enter hull number 1. You'll put any information you know about the gear, and if you know what bait they're using, as well as review status, which will be filled in later when the review occurs. Okay, at this point we see them making preparation to bait the hooks. And gear setting is underway. You can slowly drag through and watch the gear set. Typically, changes in course and direction indicate gear setting is beginning or ending, so we'll use the chart to our advantage. We can speed up the time. The video plays back on the bottom right sliding bar. This is playing back at 10 times speed. We can see the guy in the red hat has the buoy, and they're preparing to end the gear setting. And there it goes overboard. You can see the light. Important that the setting is highlighted so that the right event is capped. Here goes that buoy. Let's cap the event. and that's the setting process. So now that we've recorded our setting event, it's time to look for the following event, which is generally a recovery of the gear. We'll use the time bar to scroll through, or we could play back at up to 100 times speed. And the third option is to look at the chart to look for identifiable tracks or some indications they may be retrieving gear based on their vessel track, which could be straightening out or running parallel to where they set. So we can click through and look for those retrievals, which would be defined as the buoy coming on board, followed by the baited hooks and any catch and protected species from that haul. Let's start from the end of the last setting event, and we'll drag through to look for retrieval. Okay, we've got some folks working on deck. Let's narrow in on the timeline to see when they started hauling gear. Playback at a fast speed. We can see preparations on deck to begin the haul are underway. We can switch cameras by clicking on the camera number to bring one camera into more focus. This is the deck overview. We can see the buoys come into view. Looks like they briefly turn the lights off, back on deck. And we have a buoy on board. Let's roll in on the timeline to get a little bit closer to the location the buoy came on. Let's slow the video down using the playback speed bar and see if we have it. Okay, there's the buoy. We'll mark this. We see the buoy coming on board as the start of our recovery. Be sure to have the recovery lane highlighted and hit enter to mark the start of the recovery. This would be the haul recovery 1. And we're unsure of hook count yet, but that will be filled in later. Okay, now that we have the start defined, we're going to want to scroll through quickly. We can drop back to the normal video play and look for the endpoint of that haul of gear recovery. Beautiful sunrise, and let's see, we're looking for the last buoy to mark the end of the haul. Okay, camera 1 looks best, and we'll click through the timeline to find the exact location. Well, it looks like they had a tango, and there was the buoy. Okay, this buoy is coming on board, and while the recovery lane is highlighted, we'll use the right-facing arrow to cap the event. So at this point, we've identified the trip, gear setting, I'll zoom out, and gear recovery. So the process would continue for the rest of the trip, identifying setting and hauling events as they occur. This fishery seems to set 1 or 2 hauls per day and recovers 1 or 2 hauls per day. Once all of these sets and hauls are identified, you would go back to the recovery events, which is when the gear is retrieved, and this would start the review for catch. You could select a playback speed that feels comfortable, but when counting hooks, we find that hook counting limits review speed to about 3 to 5 times playback. You can choose your video layout by either having all 5 cameras displayed equally or clicking the camera number to pull one into focus. And then the drop-down menu has other options such as the matrix view, focus 6, or full screen. I find the matrix most helpful, and it's up to you what you would like. Okay, we can see the view on board is capturing the main deck overview, as well as a close-up of the measuring grid inside the vessel where they process, and the stern view where we watch them set gear. So that would be considered a hook. You can see how those can be counted one at a time as they're taken off and unclipped. And it appears we have our first catch. So at this point, with the catch entry lane highlighted, you'd hit enter. You would select the species from the drop-down list. This is the swordfish. We enter a count of 1 per fish. And then we take a moment to grab a measurement. The hope is that the fisherman will line the catch up along one of the measuring grid sides to get the best view. Let's see if we get a little help today. Okay, that's not too bad. So we know that this first section here is 6 inches and an additional 6 inches with the black bar. And then each of these denote 2-inch alternating lengths. So for swordfish, we're grabbing the lower jaw up here to fork length for conversion into our length weight formula. So to best capture that, we would start with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40, 42, 44, 46, 48. This is the best visual estimate, and we'll call this a 48-inch fish from lower jaw to fork length. The length is converted to centimeters and then converted to kilogram weight estimate in post-processing. We select for the length measurement a fixed measuring strip permanently attached or painted. That's what we've used. And we'll add that the length weight conversion formula will be used to estimate a weight. At this point, they tend to process the catch unless they get into several, and then they might do them all at once. So it's important while you're watching this catch that you're also going back and keeping an eye on the main line as it's brought on board. So this could be easily swapped from camera to camera. And this process continues for all hooks, counting whether or not it's empty, the catch, or any other protected species, summing up the total hooks at the end of the haul, and creating the catch entries for each item as they come on board. Here we have another small swordfish that was landed. We'll hit enter for the catch. We'll enter the species name, swordfish, a count of 1 for that individual, and we'll open up the measuring grid camera to take a look and see if they've placed it. Looks like we will not get a close-up. Let's confirm they intend to keep it. We see it's being measured and weighed. It does appear they're going to process this catch. So let's see when the best time to measure it is. Let's go back up to when it was brought on board. This is a difficult measurement angle. We'll make a note of that. For the lower jaw to fork length of this species, we'll estimate it to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, with the note that the fish was vertical. Okay, so that lower jaw to fork length estimate will get converted to centimeters and then a weight. Let's record that this was done using a visual estimation because we did not have an accurate lineup, and that the weight will be a length weight conversion formula. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to go back to when we noted the catch and switch back to the main view to make sure we didn't miss anything. And the review continues. On occasion, if the video freezes, it's best to swap back to the classic 5-camera view by toggling through the camera plus minus feature in the menu. Okay, everything's running. Okay, we've got something on the line. Here's a large swordfish. Let's make our catch entry. Select swordfish. Count of 1 for the individual. And let's take a look at how they process. Okay, they're working out a tangle on deck. So this is the process for notating catch, and it continues as the haul goes through. Let's slide forward, see if we have any species that are, here we go, we've got some sharks. This would not be how review occurs, as all hooks need to be counted. Okay, we'll zoom in on the timeline. Okay, we've got a large blue shark on deck. These catch items go in the protected fields. Hit enter and select the blue shark. Put a count of 1 for the individual. And let's take a look to see if they retain the animal. Oh, there's another one. These animals are not measured, but we're going to make a note as to their fate. Let's make camera 5 larger. Okay, this looks like they'll be keeping the animal. So in summary, let's take a look at a fully reviewed trip. You can see the orange lane for trip designates when they started and ended, as we discussed. We have comments here that this was a 100% review. We have a notation here that protected species were killed and kept, including a large grouper on Hall 5. We also have some notes here about Camera 5 video outages, 2 short video gaps that occurred. 2 large tangles may impact overall hook count. So these are relevant to overall reporting. You can take a look at each shedding event. They correspond to the green on the chart, as well as the turquoise color for the recoveries. You can see the nice pattern they create as they're annotated. Here's January 6th, 7th, 8th, and so that 1 per day seems to hold true. As we move through, there's hook counts noted in each recovery event and gear types noted in the initial gear setting. We have catch entries for each fish that was brought on board. Here's the swordfish with a weight estimate now in place. As I mentioned, this vessel mostly catches swordfish, and you can see that that's the bulk of these catch entries. We notated some events where the fish was incomplete. So in this example, let's zoom in. This is notated as a discarded fish that was damaged. And you can see as it's brought on board, it's just a head. So this has been preyed upon. And that fish goes back in. We'll take a look one more time, a little slower. There's the swordfish head. The hook is removed and it's discarded. So we can see here that note is captured in the field along with the date and time and location the event happened. We can zoom in on protected species entries. We can see here a silky shark was brought on board and retained. One more silky shark. Seems as if they had run into several. Here's a hammerhead notation. Let's zoom in to see this coming online, up from the line. That's pretty neat to see. And those notes are recorded. So this is what the full review trip looks like. Thank you for your time and attention in going through this demonstration. My name is Christy. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or the folks at Integrated Monitoring. I can be reached at christys@aisobservers.com. Thank you all. It's been great to talk to you.